Brachos, Daf Membeis through Memches. The Gemara in Daf Membeis talks about pasaba bekisnin, a certain type of bread-like thing, not exactly bread, but it's made out of flour and water, not the kind of thing you eat for a full meal. The Gemara brings various statements about it. Halacha, we say that you make bari mizonos and brachach mein shalosh alamichi on it. However, the Gemara says, and we paskin that if you eat the amount that people are kaveh suda on, even if you're not kaveh suda, if you eat the amount that people are normally kaveh suda on, then you make hamotzi and brachas mazon, and halacha is you need to wash until it's yadayim, just like bread. If a person did not originally intend to be kaveh sudan to eat that much, but then he did, so originally made mizonos, but if afterwards he realizes he did eat enough to be kaveh sudan, then he still has to make brachas mazon, even though he did not make until yadayim, did not make hamotzi in the beginning. If a person did not eat the amount that a normal person is kaveh sudan, but he himself was kaveh sudan, that doesn't matter either. We say batla daito eisel kaladam, so bein lachumra, bein lakula. It depends on eating the amount that ordinary people are kaveh sudan. What exactly is pasaba bekisnin? There are three opinions. There are three definitions. The Shulchan Aruch brings. Some say that it is a type of bread that has pockets. The pockets have fillings of honey or sugar or nuts, and that's pasaba bekisnin. Another opinion is that it is dough that has other ingredients, sweet ingredients, or other types of ingredients, honey, oil, milk, spices mixed into the dough itself. Within this opinion, there's a question about how much we're talking about. Some say as long as the taste, you can taste those ingredients, it no longer tastes like pure bread, now it tastes like sweetened bread or bread that has flavorings in it. There's another opinion that until those tastes become so pronounced, they're the ikar, they're the primary taste, it still is considered bread. Ashkenazim, paskin like the latter opinion, that an egg challah, a challah that has some flavoring in it, is still not pasab bekisnin until it reaches a point that it's really cake-like. So we make hamotzi on egg challahs and stuff like that. Mishnah Berurah says the Achronim agree that's the halacha. However, Sfardim go the other way. Sfardim say that even, at least some Sfardim say that even bread with a distinct flavor, even if it's not really fully cake-like yet, if you can taste the other flavoring, you don't make hamotzi. So Sfardim, at least some Sfardim, are particular to have a water challah without other ingredients. That's the second definition of pasab bekisnin. The third definition has to do with the texture, the consistency. If they're dry and they're crunchy, they don't have the standard bread texture, that's pasab bekisnin. Lahalacha, the Shulchan Aruch says, we paskin that all these are pasab bekisnin, so all of these you make mizonos nalamichya, unless you eat enough that people are kaveh sudan. How much is the amount that people are kaveh sudan? There are different opinions. Mishnah Berurah brings, some poskim say as little as 3 or 4 bayim, the volume of 3 or 4 eggs. Some say that the share is much larger, including the Vilna Gaon, that it has to be the share that people normally eat as a meal. Mishnah Berurah recommends, l'chatchila, you should be machmer and not eat 4 bayim, even not eat a relatively small amount, because then you're getting into a question of whether it's mizonos or hamotzi, so a person really should be machmer and avoid eating that much, and not making hamotzi and brachas mazon. Halacha also is that even if you eat an amount that not that much, people wouldn't be kaveh suda on that amount, but if you eat it with other things like meat or other things as part of a larger meal, if people eat that amount together with those other things, and you eat it with those other things too, so if you've eaten only a couple of bayim, let's say, of the pasab bekisnin, but with a large helping of chicken and meat and fish, and people would be kaveh suda on that, then also it has a din of kriya suda, and you have to make hamotzi and brachas mazon. Contemporary poskim debate whether that's only if you actually ate it together. You ate a sandwich with the mizonos roll, if the pasab bekisnin roll together with the meat, or even if you ate even if you first ate the bread and then you ate the meal of other things, the way we do on Shabbos very often. We first eat the challah, then we eat other things. If you ate pasab bekisnin and then a big plate of chicken and vegetables, that's machlokas whether that falls into this category or not. Gemara brings a rule: take after netilas yadayim bracha. Netilas yadayim should be immediately followed by brachas mazon. We paskin, the way that's interpreted in Shulchan Aruch is that you should not eat or drink anything after mayim achronim before benching. And even if you say havlan and nevarech, even if you say let's bench, that's considered hesach hadas. You're finished eating, and you also can't eat or drink anything, at least not drink, until you make a new bracha, because you're mesiach das. You're no longer continuing your meal. Machlokas Rishonim, the Shulchan Aruch brings whether you can't even eat or you just can't drink. The Rosh says you can't eat. Rabbeinu Yonah, the Ran say that you still can eat. You don't make a new bracha only on drinking until you have netilas yadayim from mayim achronim. That's Machlokas Rishonim. Mishnah Berurah says, though, that once you wash mayim achronim, even if you're willing to make a new, first of all, you shouldn't talk, he says. Not only shouldn't you eat anything, you've already finished your meal, you shouldn't eat, you shouldn't even talk, you shouldn't do anything, you shouldn't even wait, you shouldn't even delay unduly between mayim achronim and Brachas Hamazon. You shouldn't be shohesh shiyah meruba, you shouldn't have a long delay. How much is a long delay? The Sharatzian says the time it takes to walk 22 amos, 22 cubits, about 33 to 44 feet, the time it takes to walk that distance. You certainly shouldn't do anything else in between. And if you do have to be mafsik, if you have to talk, if you have to do something after mayim achronim, because of this rule of teichel l'natila bracha, you should wash mayim achronim again. People are not so meticulous about this, but the Mishnah Berurah, the poskim are quite strict that a person really needs to bench immediately after mayim achronim. Shouldn't even wait silently. He certainly shouldn't do anything or talk. If a person said havlan nevarich, if he didn't say havlan nevarich, if he or wash mayim achronim, once he took the coast to do Brachas Hamazon, people who bench Brachas Hamazon having a coast, when you take the coast, that also marks the end of the meal. That's a hesach hadas, and you can't eat anymore without a new bracha. If a person says bo nevarich, let's bench, he doesn't say havlan. Havlan means give me the coast, or he actually takes the coast. Even if they just say bo nevarich in English, we say let's bench, let's say Brachas Hamazon. That's also a hesach hadas. You can't eat without a new bracha. And even Mishnah Berurah says, mentally, internally, if you think to yourself, I'm done eating, no more food at that point, and then you change your mind and want to eat, that's a hesach hadas, you have to make a new bracha. One exception to this, the Gemara says, Anan atacha de reish galusa samchinan. Amoram said, even though we were mesiach das, but the reish galusa, we're eating at his house, and we rely on him. If he brings out more food, we eat it. Not limited to reish galusa, the Shulchan Aruch paskins that anyone who's a guest at someone else's house, even if he said havlan nevarich and he was mesiach das, as long as the balabayis didn't do that, then he's dependent on the balabayis. If the balabayis didn't execute a hesach hadas, then they don't need a new bracha if they keep on eating. The Mishnah says, if people are sitting together, they can't be motzi each other in brachas, but if they have haseba, if they're reclining together, that's more of a kviyus, that's more of a established eating together, then one can motzi the other one. The halacha, though, is, the Shulchan Aruch brings from Rishonim, today we don't do haseba. If you normally do haseba and you don't do it, that's not a kviyus. We don't do haseba. So today, as long as you're eating on one table or without a table, on one tablecloth, on one mappa, on one spread, that's a kviyus, and then you can be motzi one another, even though there's no haseba. So haseba itself is not really relevant to us. Now, even in a case where people know how to make their own brachas, since they could be motzi each other, it's a mitzvah to do that. Hiddur mitzvah, rovim hadros melech. It's a mitzvah to do brachas in a group, so one person should motzi other people. However, the Mishnah Berurah brings, most people don't do that. Most people make their own brachas, except Shabbos sometimes you have one person do it, but maybe sometimes it's simchas, but in general people make their own brachas. Mishnah Berurah is not sure why. He says, l'char it's keneged adin, ravim hadros melech. He says, maybe, eina kol b'kiyin, not everyone knows how to listen, to focus, to concentrate, to pay attention, so it's better to have everyone make their own bracha. Maybe that explains the practice. The Gemara says, we pass in Shulchan Aruch, the Gemara has all kinds of rules about wine before the meal, wine during the meal, wine after the meal. A lot of these halachos are not so relevant to the way we eat, but one particular halacha that is relevant, it says if a person drinks wine, kava, even if you're not kava, you just drink a glass of wine before the meal, that exempts wine that you drink during the meal. And one application of that is kiddush. A person makes bar priya gafen on wine before the meal, makes the bar priya gafen of kiddush before he washes, he'll see and eats bread. That patters any wine that he drinks during the meal. Daf Mem Gimel, the Gemara talks about birchas hareach, brachas that you make on smelling fragrant things. So first we have the basic principle that just as when it comes to food, you're not allowed to have hana from olam hazeh on eating food without a bracha, the same halacha, asur lehanos, you're not allowed to benefit from a good smell, reach tov, until you make a bracha. However, there's no bracha chron on reach, that's based on a Gemara later on Daf Mem Daled. So Shulchan Aruch brings, based on, the Gemara goes through a list of all kinds of different types of reach, different types of products that have reach, and what bracha you make on them. The basic rules, there are 4 or 5 different types of brachas on reach, just as with foods, there are about 4 or 5 different versions of the bracha on reach. If it comes from a tree, from wood, you say atzei besamim. If it comes from grasses, from herbs, you say isvei besamim. If it's not a tree or an herb, you make mine besamim. If it's a peri, a fruit that's roy lachila, an edible fruit, you make hanosin reach tov bepeiros. That depends why you took it. If you took it to eat it and you incidentally smell it, you don't make a bracha. If you took it in order to smell it, then you make the bracha hanosin reach tov bepeiros. And there's one more bracha on shemen afar simon. You say borei shemen arev, created fragrant oil. The important halacha though, the Shulchan Aruch says b'diavad, just like shehakol on all foods, you yotze b'diavad with shehakol. So b'diavad, if you say mine besamim, you yotze on anything. Therefore, if you're not sure what something is, you have a suffix, you make borei mine besamim. We do that in general. The only time we make this bracha at all, one of the only times, certainly the most common time for most people, is Havdalah, Motzei Shabbos. There, the halacha is explicitly that you should always make minei besamim, even though in a normal context you make all these detailed brachas. Havdalah, we always make minei besamim. Why? Because the halachas are very complicated. All brachas are complicated. The halachas of reach are certainly complicated, and it's a mass thing. Everyone does it, so the halacha wanted to simplify, so they just recommended you always make minei besamim. Eina kol bekin. However, ideally one should take a type of besamim that has that bracha of minei besamim. It's better not to take something that's atzei besamim and have to rely on the somewhat b'diavad of minei besamim. Ideally one should use besamim for Havdalah that have the bracha of minei besamim. The Gemara talks of making a bracha of nosin reactav v'perus on an esrog. There's considerable debate about this. So everyone agrees if you just take your esrog to be yotzei and you happen to smell it and it smells nice, you don't make a bracha. If you pick it up in order to smell it, that's Machlokes. Some say the primary purpose of the esrog is for mitzvah, so there's no bracha on it, no brachas reach on it. Some say if you pick it up in order to smell it, there is a bracha on it. Mishabur recommends you don't do that. You don't get involved in the question. That the Shulchan Aruch already says, Nachon shelo hariach, don't do this. Some say that the Machlokes is only if you intend to pick it up to smell it while you're being out to the mitzvah, but if you do it before or after, you certainly need a bracha. Some disagree. So the Shulchan Aruch says, avoid the question, don't pick up your esrog on Sukkos with the intent of smelling it, and get into questions of bracha. Gemara says, one who goes out in Nisan and sees flowering trees, Ilan adikam alavlavi, he makes the bracha of lachisar b'olamod klum, etc. That is what we call berachas harlanos, that we say in Nisan. Mishnah Berurah and the poskim paskin is not limited to Nisan. Nisan is typically when trees bloom, but you can really say it before or after. The Rav poskim, though, who say it should be dafka Nisan, the Chida brings in Birkei Yosef, that al pi Kabbalah, the bracha is limited to Nisan. The Gemara just says trees, but the poskim say it's only fruit trees. It doesn't apply to Ilan Esrak, to non-fruit trees. You have to see the perach, the flowering. Just seeing leaves is not enough, and that's the berachas Ilanos. The Gemara says, Noach lo la'adam sheyaplat mevakivshan ha'esh. A person should better cast himself into a flaming furnace and not humiliate his friend. Barabim from Tamar. Tamar was willing to kill herself. Had Yehuda was willing to allow herself to be killed. Had Yehuda not confessed to what he had done. There is a major debate in the poskim whether this actually is Yahari Bal Yavar. A person is actually obligated to forfeit his life rather than humiliate someone. Learn the Gemara Kipshuto. Others say no, Tamar did Amidas Chasidus, Lefnim Yeshuris Adin. Others say it's an Agada, we can't learn halacha from Agada, only the 3 cardinal sins. Others say this is a form of murder. Others say it's only the 3 cardinal sins that are Yahari Bal Yavar. We can't learn from the Agada. There's even a pshat that Rav Yehuda Chassid says Tamar wasn't going to be killed. She was going to be branded with a scarlet letter as an adulteress, but she wasn't going to actually be killed. But the Gemara Kipshuto and some Rishonim and Achronim hold this way is that a person has to suffer death rather than humiliate someone. The Gemara brings there are 6 things that are ginai, that are disgraceful for a Talmud Chacham. One of them is al yisaperim isha b'shuk. He should not converse with a woman in public in the shuk, even his wife, even his daughter, even his sister. Why? Not everyone knows who his relatives are, and people might think he's up to no good with these women. Contemporary poskim discuss, does this mean a person shouldn't talk to a woman, his wife, in public? Some say this is only a Talmud Chacham. Others say that, in general, this was true in the time of Chazal, where this looked suspicious. People didn't have conversations with their wives and female relatives in public. Today, we generally fraternize more with opposite genders, so it's not so chomer. Others say there is basis for being strict and not just trolling and being too familiar with one's female relatives in public. The Gemara Memdalad, the Mishnah expresses the famous din of Iker and Tafel. A person has Maliach and Pas, then Maliach paters the Pas, Maliach is the Iker, and you don't make a bracha on the Pas, you make a bracha on the Maliach and not on the Pas. This is the classic formulation of the rule of Iker and Tafel. That applies, that's from Bracha Rishona, Bracha Achrona we paskin, no Bracha Rishona on the Tafel, no Bracha Achrona on the Tafel. This applies whether they're mixed together, whether they're separate. Either way, we say that the Ikar, that the bracha on the Ikar exempts the Tafel, and you don't make a bracha. The Ramah brings an opinion, if the Tafel is chaviv, if in general the Tafel is more chaviv, even if now you're eating it as a Tafel, it needs a bracha. Mishnah Berurah brings that some Achronim disagree with this, but in general you make a bracha on the Ikar and not the Tafel. However, if you eat the Tafel first, if you start, the Mishnah says Tchila, that Maliach Tchila, this is when you eat the Ikar first. If you eat the Tafel first, so then the Ramah paskins, with the Shulchan Aruch paskins, that if you eat the Tafel first, it needs a bracha. However, it loses its main bracha, and the bracha is only Shakol Niyeh B'dvaro. Mishbura, the Achronim clarify a number of these halachos. When we say the ikar is mixed together, the general rule is when you have two things mixed together, the standard rule is the rove is the ikar, whichever is larger in quantity is the ikar, the minority, the one that's a smaller percentage is the tafel, unless you know that one of them happens to be the ikar clearly, otherwise you follow the rove. And grain, we saw earlier in the Masechta, grain is always assumed to be the ikar. This rule of taruvas, the rove is the ikar, poskim debate, things like fruit salads that have fruits and vegetables, you only make one bracha on the ikar. Contemporary poskim have different rules. Similar question about cholent, do you really say that you just look at the majority? Do you really say since it's grain is the ikar? Do you look at the majority? Poskim debate how we apply these rules to such types of products. The rule of ikar and tafel, if the tafel is patur, is only if you don't want it at all. Eino toiv klal, you really have no interest in the tafel. However, if you want it, even if you want the other one a little more, then there's no ikar and tafel, then certainly bread would not be tafel if you want it even a little bit. Even if you want the other thing more, the bread is still not the tafel. The rule of shakol is also complicated. The rule that if you eat the tafel first, you make a shakol on it, you have to make something, but you don't make the ikar bracha. Some posts can say that's only if the ikar bracha is shakol, but if the ikar bracha is something else, then you make the appropriate bracha on the tafel. That's a major machlokes achronim. Mishnah Berurah says again, the usual rule in such cases, a person should avoid doing this. He should avoid eating the tafel before the ikar to not get into these questions. The Gemara talks about drinking water. The halacha is if you're thirsty, you make. It's a question how to read the Gemara, but the ikar la halacha is if a person is thirsty and drinks water, he makes shakol and berei nefashos. If he's only drinking the water because he has a problem, he has a bone, it's choking him, he wants to get rid of the bone, then you make neither shakol, no berei nefashos, no bracha, not bracha rishona, not bracha achrona. Mishnah Berurah adds, when it says, when if you're thirsty you make brachas, it doesn't mean you're really thirsty, that you're really panting and you need a drink. It means as long as you have some enjoyment from the water, and it's not just for a secondary purpose, you make the bracha of shakol and berei nefashos. Also, this rule that we require some hana is only with water. Any other food or drink, orange juice, meat, popcorn, whatever it is, even if you eat or drink it for a secondary purpose, since it's inherently an enjoyable thing, it's food, it's drink, it has sugar in it, whatever it is, then you always make the appropriate bracha, even if you're just doing it to get rid of a bone or something like that. Contemporary posts can debate things like people who drink before fast days, they're not really thirsty, but they're drinking in preparation, or people are drinking tea to warm themselves up, and so on, and it's basically water. If these things are basically water, so then do you make a bracha? Do you say the chech is nana, that you have some enjoyment or not? People who drink water to get down pills, in general, poskim seem to assume that's like clearing the bone from your throat. That's not litzamo. If it's any other drink, you certainly make a bracha, and if it's just water, and you don't enjoy it at all, you have no interest in a drink, and it's just for pills, then you don't make brachas on the water. We begin. We get to Daf Mem Hey now. Daf Mem Hey is the beginning of the beginning of Shlosha Sha'achlu, the parak that deals with the laws of Zimun and Birchas Hamazon, benching in general. The Mishnah establishes a basic rule that if you eat things that are asur, that if they're really asur, there are different classes of isurim, but things that are absolutely asur, then you don't join a Zimun. The halacha is we paskin, not only don't you join a Zimun, but you don't make a bracha on it, you don't make bracha rishona, you don't make bracha achrona, even isur drabanan. If you eat an isur b'shogeg, you didn't realize it was asur, and then you realized afterward that I ate an isur, now what do I do? So the Mishnah Berurah brings from the Taz and other achronim that you do make a bracha achrona. You don't make a bracha on isur because the halach is batzeh barech nietz Hashem, that you're angering Hashem by making a bracha on an aveira. Here it was a shogeg, so make a bracha achrona. However, zimun you don't do because it's not considered a kvius, as we're going to see throughout the discussions of zimun. Zimun always hinges on kvius, on having a fixed and established gathering together. Since it was isur, that conceptually takes away from the notion of kvius, and therefore there's no zimun, even if you did it b'shogeg. One exception to this rule, if you ate the isur because of sakana, it was a matter of life and death, you had to eat the non-kosher food, then you do make a bracha on it. Bracha rishona, bracha achrona, then you do, because then there's no there's no nietz Hashem, there's nothing wrong, it's heter, it says v'chai b'hem, it's mamash heter, and therefore you make brachas on it. The Mishnah, the Gemara talks about zimun with regard to women and minors. The halacha is that they do not join a zimun. They cannot make up a quorum of 3 or 10. If some of them are women or children, they cannot form a zimun. However, mizamnin la'atzman, they could form their own zimun. The Gemara discusses nashim mizamnim, the are mizamnim, the not mizamnim. The halacha, there are different shittas in the Rishonim. The halacha is women could form a zimun, not with a shame. They can't say barak elokeinu shachal mishalah, but they could form the basic zimun of 3. And when they do zimun, it's a rishus. it's a rishus. But they can't do it b'shem. Why can they do it b'shem? Because the shem is considered davar shebekdusha. It's like kaddish and kedusha. Other things that you need a minyan of 10, and anytime you need a minyan of 10, you need a minyan of 10 men. Because we're calling shem davar shebekdusha, some achronim say a person should stand when you say Baruch Elokeinu. You should stand whenever you have a zimun of 10. That's a common minhag. Might not be a chiyuv, the midas chasidus. Others say you don't have to stand. There's a common practice to stand. Women making a zimun is a rishus. I haven't seen any poskim who recommend against it. I believe it is not common. Most places that I've seen, I've rarely seen women make their own zimun. It is something that is explicit in the Gemara, the Shulchan Aruch, and there are women who do. There are women, if they have 3 women, then they make their own zimun. If there are 3 men and there are women there, then the women have to join the zimun of the men. This is a halacha that is commonly ignored, commonly flouted. Women are busy, they're taking care of the kids, they're somewhere else. They don't come and join the zimun. The men don't bother waiting for them. This is wrong. They need to call the women. Or Moshe has a tshuva where he says that if the women are not there, they have to be called to the table. They're part of the zimun. One exception, he says, if the woman really wasn't kavua, again, zimun is based on kviyas. If she was busy, if she wasn't really joining the meal, she was busy in the kitchen, she never really became part of the meal, she didn't intend to become part of the meal, then maybe not. But otherwise, a woman's obligation to join a men's zimun is the same as the obligation of the men themselves to execute that zimun. The halacha is that if a person did not eat, but here's a zimun, then he also answers. He doesn't say Baruch Shachalnu because he didn't eat, but he makes a separate phrase. He says Baruch u'mevarach Shmo Tamed Le'olam Va'ed. And if he heard other people say Baruch Shachalnu, then he answers Amen. In general, there is an opinion that says anytime you hear a zimun, that after the mezamin repeats Baruch Shachalnu Mishalo, everyone says Amen. Mishnah Berurah there are different opinions about that, but the minhag is that we don't say Amen. Some Siddurim I think print it, but the minhag is that we don't say Amen in a regular zimun, only in this case where the person didn't join the zimun and came and heard people saying a zimun. But you say Baruch Shachalnu, and if there were 10 people, you say Baruch Elokeinu. If there are 3 people and you hear and you didn't eat, you say Baruch Mevarach Shmo Tamed. If there are 10 people, you say Baruch Elokeinu Mevarach Shmo Tamed Le'olam Va'ed. That's the halacha of someone who didn't eat but joins the zimun. The Gemara talks about saying the Amen after the 3rd bracha of benching, after Banei Barachim of Yerushalayim or Banei Yerushalayim. You say Amen. The Gemara brings different opinions about whether you say it out loud or say it quietly. You say it, we pass, and you say it quietly. The reason you say Amen at all, even though normally you never answer Amen after your own bracha, almost never, but here you do to mark the end of the brachas daraisa. We pass in the first 3 brachas are daraisa, but Tov Ametiv is drabanan, so we say Amen to signify the end of the daraisa. We say it balachash. We follow the opinion of the Gemara that we say it balachash. We say it quietly, so people shouldn't. We don't want to proclaim too loudly that the last one is drabanan, so people shouldn't come to be mazalzel to denigrate the 4th bracha. The minhag is that we say the Amen out loud. Certainly when we sing the benching, we sing Amen out loud. In general, we say the Amen out loud. We don't follow this halacha of saying it quietly. Post can bring various svaras for why. One svara the Mishnah Berurah brings is that the whole danger of people not taking the 4th bracha seriously, being mezalzel, was in the time of Chazal. We find certain leniencies with regard to workers. Workers can say an abbreviated benching. They didn't say the 4th bracha. So people understood it wasn't as important, and people might come to be too dismissive toward the 4th bracha. Today we don't follow the halakha of the workers. Workers say the whole benching. So today there's no worry about it. Today we say Amen. There's not going to be any zilzal. They're not going to come to be too casual about the 4th bracha. The poskim say that when you say Bonei Yerushalayim, Bonei Barachim Yerushalayim, Amen, you shouldn't just say Bonei Yerushalayim, Amen. Amen is not part of the bracha. You should pause. You shouldn't say it in one breath. You should pause to indicate that the Amen is not part of the bracha. The Amen is an Amen on the bracha. It's not part of the bracha. The Gemara brings various customs in Daf Memvav about who does the betzia, who makes the hamotzi and breaks the bread, and who makes the brachas hamazon. We pass in the balabayas is betzia. The balabayas should be the one to break the bread. We want it to be generous and give large portions. If someone else is breaking the bread, he might not feel comfortable giving large portions. Who does the benching? It is the arech. The guest should make the benching. Why? So he should say that we should bless the balabayas. The Gemara goes on and explains the nusach of the bracha of the balabayas. Yiratzon shloi vosh balabayas hazeh, the bracha that the arech is supposed to make for the balabayas. Since this is for the balabayas' benefit, he can waive it. He can say, I don't need it. I'd rather give the benching to somebody else. He can bench himself if he wants. It's for his benefit, so he should get a bracha from the arech. The Achronim disagree where in benching you say berachas arech. Some say, based on language of the Rambam, that you say it right after, it's part of the 4th bracha, so you say it right after the end of the 4th bracha. Al yichasreinu, and then you say, Yiratzon shloi vosh balabayas hazeh. Others, Rishonim and Achronim, say that you say it in the Harachman. Some say you say it in the Harachman of Hu Yivarech is Balabayis Hazeh. Then you say Yiratzon Shlo Yivash Balabayis Hazeh. Some of the Sidurim and benches printed there. Some say that you say it at the end of the Harachmans. You say it B'vracha Shlema V'no Maramein after at the end of all the Harachmans. Then you say Yiratzon Shlo Yivash Balabayis Hazeh. Different minhag. The Gemara brings, we had first back on Mem Gimel, and now again here, the Gemara brings that the person who's going to do Berachas HaMazon should do Mayim Achronim first, to give him time to think about the brachas, prepare his benching, give him a few seconds to organize the benching of the zimun in his head. Gemara has a complicated set of rules that you only need to go before 4 other people. If there are 5 people, you go first. The time it takes for 4 people to wash, you'll have time to think about the 4 brachas. If there's more than that, if there's 10 people, if there's 100 people, then it's not covered for you to go first, because it's a gnai for you to sit there, for the gadol who's benching to sit there with his hands, after he washes his hands, and it's and also it's a hefsek between Mayim Achronim and he's going to bench Mayim Achronim and benching. So the first bunch of people bench. You start from the least important person. Then when there's 5 people left, the gadol, the one who's going to do the Berachas HaMazon, then he washes Mayim Achronim. We give him time, even though today. This is a theme that comes up repeatedly in Paraketim Mavarachim, that in the time of Chazal, the Mazamin was the one who did the whole benching, and no one else benched. They all listened to him. Today, the Mazamin says the Zimun, but everyone does their own Berachas HaMazon. Still, we still give him time. We still follow the halacha of him washing Mayim Achronim, not the last one, to give him time to prepare, because since he's going to say it out loud, he's going to say the Zimun, and he's going to... People are supposed to say the brachas quietly along with him. He's going to say it out loud. He still needs a little time to prepare. We don't want him to make a bracha too early. We don't want him to wash Achronim too early, because then it'll be too long of a hefsek. So that was true when he was the only one doing the benching. Today we all bench. The Mishnah Berurah says whoever washes first, that person's going to have a hefsek. So ideally, the Bir Halacha says the right thing to do is, if you have a number of people, you should have multiple Mayim Achronim. You shouldn't have a 10-minute process while everyone washes Mayim Achronim one after another, because that'll create too long of a hefsek between the first person and the benching. He's going to bench also. So therefore, if you have multiple people, it's better to have multiple provisions of water for Mayim Achronim. The Gemara brings a halacha that none of the people at the table on Mem Zayin, nobody at the table is allowed to eat until the Batzeya, the person who breaks the bread, eats first. The Shulchan Aruch said, the poskim say, you're allowed to pass around the bread first before you eat and give them the bread, but they have to hold on to it until you take your bite. Then they can eat their bread. They can eat their bread too. Even if the Baal Bayis says, I don't mind, it's respect for me, I don't mind, you can eat. Some say you still shouldn't do that, but nobody should eat until the Mavarech eats his piece of bread first. If they all have their own chalas, and they're just being yotzi or bracha, then it's okay, because they have their own bread, so they don't really need you. Unless it's Shabbos, they need Lechem Mishnah, and you're the only one with Lechem Mishnah, and then they shouldn't eat until you eat. But some poskim say you can pass it around, and then they'll all wait until you make the bracha. The Taz says you really shouldn't do this, because if you pass around all the bread first and you haven't eaten yet, it's a hefsek. Even though you're not talking, but you're passing around all the challah first, you shouldn't do that. So, since they can eat anyway, what's the point? You can pass the bread around because it's not really a hefsek, because it's tzarech suda. But if they're not going to eat, so then what are you doing this for? They can't eat anyway, so it's a hefsek. You really shouldn't do that. You should take a piece of bread first, eat a bite first before you pass around the bread. I think I've seen people do both things. But this is the Taz, that the Taz says a person, before passing around bread, should make sure to take a bite himself. The halacha is the gadol is mevarech. The gadol b'chachma, the Talmud Chacham should be the one to do Berachas HaMazon. Earlier we saw that the areach overrides that because of the need for Berachas areach. For the bracha for the Baal Bayis, the gadol is the one who does that. But the areach is the one who does that. But if there's no areach, then then we give it to the gadol. In the time of Chazal, again, only the gadol did the benching, so he should be the one to mevarech. Even Bizman Hazeh, where everyone does the benching themselves, but still it's an honor that the one to do zimun should be the gadol. So then the areach does it. That's when there's no Baal Bayis, nobody has the right to this Berachas HaMazon. Then they should all, if it's just a bunch of people who have their own breads, then they should honor the gadol. But in the case where it's all from the Baal Bayis, then it's up to him to give the bracha to whoever he wants. He can give it to the areach, or he can give it to anyone he wants. If there's multiple archim, the Baal Bayis can give it to any areach he wants, even if one is gadol. People today tend to have a hodgepodge, give it to the Kohen, give it to the gadol. People do all kinds of things, but Mikra Adin, if there's a Baal Bayis, he can give it to any areach that he wants, or do it himself. If there's no Baal Bayis, then it should be the gadol. Birchas areach, so we've been saying that you give it, that the areach does the benching in order to mevarech to the Baal Bayis. Now, today, as we keep saying, today everyone does Berachas HaMazon, not just the Mazamin. Aruch HaShulchan says it's pashut then that everyone should say Berachas Arech, even not the Mezamin. Everyone who's benching should say Berachas Arech, and he says consequently there might not be any reason to give the benching to the Arech anymore. If they're all going to say Berachas Arech, then it doesn't matter who you give the benching to. I've heard some people have argued that other poskim don't bring this. Mishnah Berurah doesn't bring this. Other people don't bring this. So maybe other poskim understood that the halacha stays the same as in the time of Chazal. That either that only the Arech says Berachas Arech, or the din to give the bracha to him stays the same. But the Aruch HaShulchan thinks it's pashut that everyone should say Berachas Arech, and he also thinks that it therefore follows that today there's no real reason to give specifically an Arech the honor of benching. The Gemara says that an Amaharetz does not count for Zimun. What's an Amaharetz? The Gemara gives various different definitions. Even someone who learns Mikra, he knows Tanakh and he learns Mishnah, but if he hasn't done Shimush T'Malei Chachamim, he hasn't done Gemara, he's an Amaharetz, and that's what we paskin, and you don't count him for a Zimun. We don't follow this halacha. We paskin that Amaharetz Gomer, even in someone who doesn't have any of these levels of Torah, still we count him for the Zimun. Not like the Gemara. The reason is that the poskim said that we were afraid that if we rejected them, if we didn't count them for Zimun, they would exclude themselves from the community, they would be parish min hatzibur, and in order to be as inclusive as possible, we no longer apply this halacha. However, as someone who's not keeping mitzvahs, which everyone keeps, not just an Amaharetz who's not an elite, someone who doesn't do things that all Jews do, like he doesn't say Kriya Shema daily, some say that we don't count him at all because this is an exception. This is not a regular person. All of Klal Yisrael says Kriya Shema, he doesn't. So then you don't count him for a Zimun. Kolshkein, someone who's a Russian over Averis, but for Hefsia, who completely doesn't keep Torah mitzvahs, you don't count him. Again, how this would apply B'zman Hazeh, where many Jews don't say Kriya Shema, many Jews don't keep Torah mitzvahs, so that would be a question we'd have to consider. How do we apply the law of Zimun B'zman Hazeh? The Gemara in Daf Memches says that a katan, you count for Zimun if he's Yodei L'mi Mevarchin Mizamnin, if he understands HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he understands who the bracha is directed toward, then you count him for a Zimun. Shulchan Aruch phrases that as Higia La'onas HaPa'utos, a certain age where he has a certain level of intelligence, and he knows who the bracha is directed toward, then he counts for a Zimun of 3, Zimun of 10. However, the Haggah says, Ramah says, some say no, that until you reach actually 13, you don't count for a Zimun. That's certainly the accepted practice, that until you reach Bar Mitzvah, we don't count you. Then, once you're 13, we assume that he reached the physical signs of maturity as well, the Shtei Saras, then we count him for the Zimun, and that's the minhag. This is all, though, based on a chazaka. We assume he had 2 saras. However, if you know he doesn't have 2 saras, if you know for sure that he has not reached his physical maturation, even if he has 13 years, it doesn't matter. This is all regarding counting him for Zimun for 3 or 10. But regarding him being the Mizamin, everyone agrees that he has to reach 13 years of age and he has to have 2 saras. The halach is we don't rely on the chazaka that he has 2 saras for a daraisa. Benching is daraisa, so a katan, even if he's 13, he can't be motzi others unless we know for sure that he has 2 saras. But again, that was only in the time of Chazal, the earlier time where only the Mizamin bench, and he was motzi everyone else in benching. B'zman hazeh, where everyone benches and the Mizamin is just doing the mitzvah of Zimun, then the Mishnah Berurah says, we do rely on Chazaka, we rely on the Chazaka of 13. The Mishnah Berurah seems to be assuming here that Zimun itself is not daraisa, that's a discussion in the poskim. But the Mishnah Berurah says we can rely on being 13 for Zimun, as long as everyone is doing the Ram Brachas Mazon, which today is always the case. So today, any Bar Mitzvah boy can do Zimun, although again, the minhag is that before Bar Mitzvah, even if they exhibit intelligence, we don't count them for Zimun. The halacha is, when you're counting a Zimun for 10, all 10 have to eat. However, they don't all have to eat bread. The halacha is, as long as 7 have eaten bread, and 3 have eaten other things, vegetables, or even water, shtia b'chlal achila, that's enough to say Baruch Elokeinu, to mizamin with Hashem, unless they've made a bracha achrona. Once they made a bracha achrona, they can no longer count for the Zimun. But if they haven't made a bracha achrona, even if you have 7 with bread and 3 with other foods, they count for Zimun. Any other drink except for water, water does not count because water does not nourish. Any other food or drink is good, but water doesn't nourish, so it doesn't count for Zimun. The Magen Avraham says that even water counts. Any shtia is b'chlal achila. Other Chachamim disagree. So that's a machlokes akronim. Before we said that when it comes to saying the Baruch Shachalu, we already have 10 people. You just want to say Baruch Shachalu. We say shtia b'chlal achila. That is even water. I believe when it comes to counting toward the Zimun, as one of the 3 who ate non-bread foods, then it's a machlokes akronim whether you count water. But the Mizamin himself, the one who does the Zimun, should be one of the ones who actually ate bread. Should be one of the ones. But 6 people eating bread is not enough, even though it's rov. Really all you need is rov. But a simple rov is not enough. You need ruba de a distinct rov, a noticeable rov, so we require 7 who ate actually bread. The Gemara brings a story about being motzi somebody else when they ate a full meal and you only ate a kazayas. So we say that lahotzias rabbi de chavasan, you can be motzi the rabbim in zimun and benching, even if you've only eaten a kazayas. You have to eat a kazayas, but once you've eaten a kazayas, you can be motzi others the way we paskin, even if they have eaten a larger amount, an amount of kesvi, an amount that they're satisfied, and their benching is daraisa, and yours is drabanan, you can still be motzi them. The Mishnah Berurah explains because midaraisa you can really be motzi somebody else. Since they have to bench, you can, even if you didn't anything, can be motzi them. But because it would be sheker to say shachalnu, so you have to be eaten at least a kazayas. But even though that's only drabanan and they're daraisa, you can still be motzi them. However, it's a mitzvah. Ideally, in such a case, someone who did a kidei svia and has a chiyuv midaraisa should be the one to do the actual zimun. But if they don't know how to bench, if you need to, you can be the one who benched as long as you ate a kazayas. And again, this is only, once again, we see the rule, the Mishnah Berurah says, the Achronim say, this is only in the time of Chazal, when only the Mizamin benched, everyone else was Yotze with his benching. But the way we do it today, where everyone benches and the Mizamin just says the Zimun, it doesn't matter, even if your Chiyav is only Drabanan, because you ate a Kazayas, and they ate Kedei Svia, their Chiyav is Deraisa, since they're all benching separately, you're just doing the Zimun, you can do it even if you've only eaten a Kazayas. Ramah brings an interesting halacha. The Ramah says that some say that the Chiyav of Birchas Hamazon Deraisa, Torah says, V'achal Tavis Avata, the chiyuv is only, not only do you have to have eaten to be chayav midaraisa, you can't be thirsty. If you're not thirsty, you're not thirsty. But if you are thirsty and you haven't drunk, you don't have a chiyuv daraisa, that's not called a full svia. So therefore, midaraisa, if you haven't drunk and you're thirsty still, you wouldn't have a chiyuv daraisa. So once again, in the case of some who have drunk and some who are still thirsty, it'll be better to have the one who is not thirsty do the benching. Again, Mishnah Berurah said, though, that this doesn't apply today, where everyone makes their own brachas hamazon, and it's only a question of zimun.